Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and domestic abuse and violence. And anyway, first thing I look at as far as astrology and potential domestic abuse, violence, is adverse aspects between Mars and the Moon in the natal chart. Mars, of course, is the angry, acrimonious planet, and the Moon represents the family and the home. So that is one thing I look at. Had a prominent family member that she has her Moon making opposition to her Mars, and she has been in certain contentious situations with family members. Now, another thing to look at as well, as far as this goes, is perhaps looking at the aspects with Mars in the synastry in the people at home. Now, let's say that Mars makes adverse negative aspects to another person's natal points in their chart. There could at least be a slightly greater propensity for violence and volatility between the two. Now, looking at this as Mars in Cancer could really, especially afflicted, can be another indicator. Mars, of course, already is basically afflicted in Cancer, being in its fall. But if it's making a lot of negative aspects, adverse aspects, it could even be greater propensity for contentious situations in the home. And my Mars is in Cancer, and I have seen at least one volatile confrontation between members in my family. And people, with Mars in Cancer, may actually feel like their home is a perpetual battle. And this could go for Mars in the fourth house as well. And the thing is, you look at this, family members in the home and with you. If you got Mars in the fourth, Mars in Cancer. If you got Mars in the fourth, of course you've got to blend in the sign. If it's like Mars in Sagittarius, say in the fourth house, this could be philosophical differences. Really, it could be a lot of arguments about religion, even sports, and things that are just Sagittarius related in general. And anyway, another thing is that also looking at Chiron as well. Let's say that Chiron, I know I had a friend that had a family member of hers. His Chiron makes a conjunction to her ascendant in Virgo, and she had told me that she had succumbed to certain abuse, physical abuse from him. And I imagine being in Virgo, this could be connected with a lot of like derisive, derogatory, critical, judgmental remarks as well. I'm sure there was a lot of criticism, so there was a lot of that verbal critical abuse as well. I'm sure that was connected with this. Now, and of course, like if you have somebody that has their Chiron making a conjunction to your natal ascendant, there could be a little greater propensity for perhaps dealing with some kind of physical abuse or situation from this person. And let's say if it falls in the 12th house, this would be more about secret sorrows, and you might be a little more reluctant to divulge this outwardly. But let's say the conjunction falls in your first house, this is more likely to be expressed outwardly, and it would be a little harder to conceal if you were indeed trying to hide this situation. Now, another thing is, if you've got Mars transiting the fourth house, and especially if it's making a number of adverse aspects to natal points in your chart, this could again increase the proclivity or propensity for violence and volatility at home, and which of course could be as domestic abuse. Now, also, let's say Chiron is transiting the fourth house. This could have an effect as well, given that Chiron could be about emotional and even physical wounds in some cases. If you, let's say the Black Moon Lilith is even transiting the fourth house, this could be a this could be something where you might have like this domestic tyrant on your hands, and somebody at home is acting maybe in this ruthless, tyrannical manner. Let's say if it's in Leo, and it could be a lot of really like that could be somebody that might reflect a very domineering and control freak. And you got to factor in the arrogance perhaps with that, because Black Moon Lilith energy can often manifest in bringing out the negative, the strong negative characteristics of that sign. So anyway, another thing too is, now also, I mean, if something is happening in a progressed chart where Mars is, or even Chiron is in the fourth, or even the Black Moon Lilith in the fourth, this could be a period for this as well. Now the transit, of course, could last a lot for a shorter duration than, say, if you had something by progression. Now, also too, as I've talked about in previous videos, that Jupiter is a planet that can be very paradoxical. It's very strongly benign and benevolent, but it can also have the tendency to enlarge and expand, and it can apply to these situations as well. Let's say for example that in transit, let's say transit Jupiter makes a conjunction to your natal fourth house Mars, or even Chiron, Black Moon Lilith in the fourth. This could increase that possibility for violence in the home. And if you have this, say you have an aspect in your natal chart, let's say Jupiter conjuncts Mars in the fourth, or even Chiron in the fourth, or the Black Moon Lilith in the fourth, this could be something that you might be dealing with it, or at least on and off for a very good period if it's there natally. And even in progression, it could be there for a pretty good period. So now, also too, another thing is, now let's say there's some other things. I want to talk about an example of a prominent family member that has, multitude of these indicators for domestic abuse and violence in her chart. Now, she has, the first thing is Mars in Cancer. Of course, Cancer is associated with family and home. She has it in its fall. Mars in Cancer conjunct her ascendant, which of course is the physical body, and it's at its full culmination at 29 degrees, a critical or anaretic degree. The ascendant and Mars are both at 29 degrees. This opposes her moon, which of course is the family, and the moon in its detriment in Capricorn. And Capricorn, the moon Capricorn she has, is at a critical degree as well, 26. Saturn she has as well. Saturn can represent the father. She has that in her detriment in Cancer, conjunct the ascendant in the 12th house of secret sorrows. The Saturn again conjuncts her moon and opposes her moon. Saturn, the fact that Saturn even makes an opposition to her moon, regardless of signs, can show that even the father and her mother can be in a contentious situation. Now, they never divorced. A lot of times that's an aspect for divorce, and even I would say the moon even square Saturn, or even moon in conjunct Saturn, adverse aspects, I believe, in general with Saturn and the moon can do this. Now, another, or at least give a greater tendency toward this. Now, and the thing too is, on top of that, she has the Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio in her 4th house. Her sun in Scorpio is in fairly close proximity to that Black Moon Lilith. She had claimed to have been sexually abused by a family member. So if that is true, I could understand that. Now, from just looking at this chart, it shows a lot of tremendous discord, potential for tremendous discord and strife in the family life. And also, when you look at it, in the person that she claimed did the committed this act of sexual abuse toward her, in his solar chart, I didn't know his time of birth, but in his solar chart, based on the sunrise time, he had Mercury in Leo conjunct Neptune in Leo in the 12th house of mental illness. He had some kind of that disease, delusions of grandeur. I think another name for it is grandiose delusions. But anyway, I mean, and the thing about this too, there's also subtle or indirect things which I think could really inflate a possibility, greater possibility or potential for domestic abuse and violence in the home. Now, the thing about it is, I mean, you could even have somebody that has a very afflicted chart. And when I say afflicted chart, I mean a really multitude of adverse aspects where they have predominantly negative aspects in their chart, which of course could cause all kinds of tension and exasperation in the person. And there could be many sources of consternation because of this. And they could be taking their inadequacies, their frustrations out on others, even if the synastry, even if the synastry is good between that person and the other, it could still sometimes just be something about that particular individual's chart, which is giving them that greater propensity toward volatility. And I mean, let's say, I mean, for example, that somebody has their natal Venus making an adverse aspect to their ascendant or even the sun or the moon. This person can be unhappy. I mean, if it's the ascendant, they could be very dissatisfied with their physical appearance and how they look, or the fact that maybe they have difficulty even loving themselves, and they could take that out on others. And it could even be not as much the appearance, if it's the let's say their Venus, their natal Venus makes an adverse aspect to their moon or sun, but they could still be unhappy with certain proponents of themselves. And the moon would be more on an unconscious level, and I think the sun would be like who they are inside. So, and let's say another example, let's say that somebody has in their natal chart, they have their natal Mars making an adverse aspect, well, let's say to their ascendant, to their moon, or to their sun. Well, they could be, if it's to the ascendant, they could be really angry about who they're projecting outwardly, their outward demeanor and their appearance. And if it's the moon, it's more an unconscious level, maybe anger at oneself. And then, of course, if it's to that Mars makes an adverse aspect to their own sun, well, that could just simply be about who they are inside. They could be dissatisfied and angry at, and they could take this and project this onto others, perhaps. So, I mean, also too, and some other points quick, I mean, a verbally combative situation could obviously be if someone's Mars makes an adverse aspect to another's natal Mercury. This also, Moon adverse Pluto, making in a synastry chart, can cause sometime or suggest emotional manipulation and control. And even Mars afflicted in a composite chart could perhaps really increase the possibility of some strong discord and strife, which could result in some kind of domestic violence or some kind of abuse. So, I mean, even in a progressed chart, if the synastry becomes very bad between one person and another, that could be another possibility or stronger indicator for perhaps domestic abuse and violence. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for astrology and domestic abuse. And stay tuned next time, where I'm going to be giving you my Aries April 2018 horoscope forecast. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.